Welcome back to Mystery Minds, the channel where we dive into deep and chilling mysteries of true crime. Imagine being adopted into what seems like a loving home, only to realize you've entered a prison. 5 children, taken in by a seemingly kind couple, were stripped of their identities, forced into servitude, and locked away in a basement for years. This is the horrifying true story of the Whitmore case, a tale of unimaginable cruelty, a daring escape, and a trial that would shock the nation. Fairview was the kind of town where neighbors greeted each other by name, children rode their bikes freely down the streets, and the biggest scandal involved a late library book. So when Mark and Helen Whitmore announced they had adopted 5 foster children, the community welcomed them as heroes. The Whitmores were the picture of suburban success. Mark was a well-respected financial advisor, and Helen volunteered at the local church. Their stately white brick home, complete with a manicured lawn and a white picket fence, gave the impression of warmth and stability. The couple had no biological children of their own, but they spoke often about their desire to make a difference in the lives of underprivileged kids. When they adopted Jaden, Malik, Tasha, Andre, and Zoe, siblings who had bounced between foster homes for years, it seemed like a miracle. The children, all under the age of 14, had suffered through neglect and instability. The idea of a permanent home, a real family, was something they had longed for. At first, everything seemed normal. The Whitmores paraded the children around town, dressing them in coordinated outfits for Sunday church. They told glowing stories about how well the kids were adjusting. To the outside world, the Whitmore house was filled with love and laughter. But behind closed doors, the facade quickly crumbled. The shift was subtle at first. Helen began assigning the children more chores than seemed reasonable, scrubbing floors, washing cars, ironing Mark's shirts to perfection. "It's just to teach you responsibility," she'd say, her voice sweet but firm. Mark, meanwhile, established strict household rules. No talking at the dinner table unless spoken to, no playing outside without permission, and no questioning their authority. Any disobedience was met with increasingly severe punishments. Soon, the children's freedom was stripped away entirely. They weren't allowed to use the phone or interact with neighbors. Their school attendance became sporadic, and when teachers asked questions, Helen had an explanation ready. "They've had a hard past," she would say with a practiced sigh. "We're working through some behavioral issues." But the truth was much darker. The Whitmores never intended to give the children a better life. They had adopted them for control, power, and labor. And as the days passed, the house that had once seemed like a safe haven became a prison, one where love was a lie and survival meant obedience. The Whitmore house looked pristine from the outside, white shutters, a well-kept lawn, and flower beds perfectly arranged. But beneath the surface, hidden from the world, was a nightmare that no one could have imagined. The basement was where the true horror unfolded. What should have been a storage or recreational space was transformed into a prison for Jaden, Malik, Tasha, Andre, and Zoe. The room was damp, windowless, and smelled of mildew. The only source of light came from a single, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls were lined with shelves filled with household supplies, but there were no signs of comfort for the children. No blankets, no toys, no beds. The concrete floor was their only resting place. Mark and Helen treated their adopted children not as sons and daughters, but as servants. Every morning before the sun rose, they were ordered upstairs and put to work. Jaden, the eldest at 14, was tasked with yard work, mowing the lawn, trimming hedges, and shoveling snow in the winter. Malik and Andre scrubbed the floors and cleaned the bathrooms, while Tasha and little Zoe washed clothes and prepared meals under Helen's watchful eye. If the children made a mistake, or simply displeased the Whitmores, they were dragged back to the basement as punishment. There they would go hungry for days, locked away in the darkness, shivering from the cold. Mark installed surveillance cameras to ensure they never attempted to escape. The children quickly learned that any sign of resistance would be met with cruelty. Some nights, the hunger was unbearable. Jaden would press his ear to the basement door, listening for any sign that the Whitmores had gone to bed. If the house was silent, he would creep up the stairs, trying to steal a crust of bread or a handful of cereal. But the Whitmores were always one step ahead. The fridge and pantry were locked, and if they caught him searching for food, the punishment was severe. Whippings with a belt, hours standing in a stressed position, or complete isolation. Hope was a dangerous thing in the Whitmore house. The children knew that every day was a battle to survive. And yet, even in the depths of their suffering, they never gave up the dream of freedom. For years, escape had felt impossible. The Whitmores controlled everything: what the children ate, where they slept, when they spoke. Every door was locked, every movement monitored by security cameras. But as the abuse worsened, so did their determination. They knew that if they didn't escape, they might not survive. The opportunity came one bitterly cold night in December. The children had spent the day scrubbing floors and washing dishes under Helen's sharp gaze. As punishment for accidentally dropping a plate, Jaden and Malik had been sent to the basement without food. Tasha, Andre, and Zoe were forced to stay upstairs, working late into the evening. But that night something changed. Tasha had been secretly working on loosening the rusted grate of a small, high-up window in the basement. It was barely big enough for a child to squeeze through, but after weeks of careful effort, she had finally pried it open just enough. Now the only thing left to do was act. Jaden, as the eldest, went first. He hoisted himself up, his fingers gripping the rough concrete as he forced his body through the narrow opening. The freezing wind stung his skin as he tumbled onto the cold, wet grass outside. He quickly turned back, whispering for the others to follow. Malik went next, then Tasha, Andre, and finally little Zoe, who was too weak to climb on her own. Jaden lifted her, whispering reassurances as she squeezed through. Once outside they ran. Barefoot and shivering, they bolted through the dark, empty streets. Every sound made them flinch: a barking dog, a distant car, the rustling of trees. Fear gripped them with every step. If the Whitmores realized they were gone before they found help, they would be dragged back, and the punishment would be worse than anything they had ever endured. Jaden spotted a house with its lights still on. He pounded on the door with trembling fists. When no one answered, he ran to the next house. Finally, a porch light flicked on. An elderly woman opened the door, her eyes widening at the sight of 5 terrified children. "Help us," Jaden begged, his voice hoarse. She didn't hesitate. She ushered them inside and called 911. Within minutes, sirens pierced the night air. The nightmare was about to end, but the real battle was just beginning. The arrest of Mark and Helen Whitmore sent shockwaves through Fairview. Neighbors who once admired them now stood in disbelief, watching as police led the couple away in handcuffs. The charges were staggering: multiple counts of child abuse, false imprisonment, neglect, and human trafficking. The 5 children, who had suffered years of torment, were now the key witnesses in a case that would grip the entire country. As the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, activists, and concerned citizens filled the seats, eager to hear the horrifying details of what had happened inside the Whitmore home. Prosecutors wasted no time painting a chilling picture of the cruelty inflicted on Jaden, Malik, Tasha, Andre, and Zoe. Graphic images of the basement, cold, empty, devoid of anything resembling a safe living space, were shown to the jury. Testimonies from doctors revealed the extent of the children's malnourishment and injuries, some of which had left permanent scars. The most heart-wrenching moments came when the children took the stand. Jaden, his voice steady but his hands shaking, described the daily beatings, the starvation, and the relentless fear of punishment. Tasha recalled the countless nights she spent trying to pry open the basement window, clinging to the hope that freedom was possible. Even little Zoe, barely able to understand the full extent of what had happened, bravely told the court how she was forced to clean and serve her parents, while being denied food and warmth. The defense tried to spin a different story. The Whitmore's attorney claimed they had simply been strict foster parents dealing with troubled children. Helen wept on the stand, insisting they only wanted to provide structure. Mark sat stoic, barely acknowledging the children he had tormented for years. But the jury saw through their lies. The overwhelming evidence, the surveillance footage, the medical records, the testimonies, left no room for doubt. After just 3 hours of deliberation, the verdict was read: guilty on all counts. When the judge delivered the sentence, 365 years in prison, gasps echoed through the courtroom. It was a punishment meant to ensure neither Mark nor Helen would ever taste freedom again. As the Whitmores were led away, the children sat in the courtroom, no longer victims but survivors. Justice had been served, but their journey toward healing had only just begun. The Whitmores were gone, locked away in prison for the rest of their lives, but for Jaden, Malik, Tasha, Andre, and Zoe, freedom didn't mean instant healing. The years of abuse had left invisible wounds, deep scars that couldn't be erased overnight. At first, adjusting to a normal life felt impossible. Simple things like sleeping in a real bed or eating without fear of punishment felt unfamiliar. The children flinched at sudden movements and hesitated before speaking, as if waiting for permission. Even in safety, their bodies still carried the instinct to survive. They were placed with a foster family who specialized in caring for trauma survivors. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, a kind-hearted couple, welcomed them into their home with open arms. There were no locked doors, no basement, no punishments for speaking out of turn. But trust was difficult. The idea that kindness could exist without conditions was foreign to them. Therapy became a crucial part of their recovery. Each child had their own struggles. Jaden, the eldest, carried the burden of guilt. He had always tried to protect his siblings, but in the Whitmore's house he had felt powerless. Malik had trouble sleeping, haunted by nightmares of being locked away. Tasha, once the most defiant, struggled with anxiety, always fearing something bad was about to happen. Andre and Zoe, the youngest, clung to each other, afraid of being separated again. Over time, small victories emerged. Jaden learned to smile again. Malik started playing basketball at school. Tasha wrote in a journal, using words to process her pain. Andre and Zoe found comfort in bedtime stories, something they had never experienced before. Years passed, and the once broken children became strong, resilient young adults. They vowed that their suffering wouldn't be in vain. Jaden went to college to study social work, determined to help children trapped in abusive homes. Tasha became an advocate, speaking publicly about the failures of the foster care system. Malik, Andre, and Zoe also found their own paths, each one proving that their past would not define them. Their story, once a tragedy, became a testament to survival. Though the scars remained, they had something the Whitmores had tried to steal from them: hope. They had escaped not just their captors, but the darkness that had once consumed their lives. And together they moved forward, proving that even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, the human spirit could rise again. The Whitmores thought they could hide their dark secrets forever, but justice found them. Though the scars remain, these 5 survivors refuse to be defined by their trauma. Their story serves as a haunting reminder of the evil that can lurk behind closed doors, but also of the resilience of the human spirit. If you found this case shocking, make sure to subscribe to Mystery Minds for more true crime stories that reveal the darkest corners of human nature. Stay curious, stay cautious, and until next time, keep your eyes open.